All right, welcome back. This is part two of our second series of our Crash Course Bible lesson for SPH Sentul Bible class. We just talked about Isaac. We're going to go to the next big part of the story, and this is Jacob. Jacob was the younger son of Isaac. He stole the blessing of being the oldest child from his brother Esau. He also tricked Esau out of giving up his birthright for a bowl of soup. And so, through these unconventional, sinful ways, he eventually fulfilled the prophecy that was said about him early on when he was still a baby in the womb, that the older would serve the younger, and that nations would be brought out of this. And so, Esau eventually was older and became his own nation, starting his own lineage. But we're going to focus on Jacob, whose name later became Israel. So, a few important things that we have highlighted on the left, you can see are uh, right. He tricked his brother. He stole from his brother. He ran away after he did that, and he married two sisters, Leah and Rachel. Their dad was Laban, okay, and um, Jacob had to work 7 years to marry each of them. Okay, that's 14 years of your life. Some of you might be 14, your whole life working so you can marry somebody's daughter. Another highlight from his life is he wrestled with God, and the last one is he followed his son to Egypt, and it actually is, you'll find out later, fulfillment of one of God's promises to Abraham. So uh, we'll start. We'll start with we'll start with Jacob stealing from Esau. So Esau was the oldest. He was given the right to the inheritance. He gave that up when it was, well, he didn't steal the birthright, but he gave up his birthright for a bowl when he came back from the fields hungry. And so uh, Jacob was the cook and Esau was hungry, so he sold him his birthright for food. And then later on, Jacob, with the help of his mom, disguised himself to be hairy like his brother and smell like the field, um, and he cooked a meal for his dad, and his dad blessed him. And his dad was blind at the time, that's Isaac, and he eventually got both the birthright and the blessing from his brother. When his brother found out about this, he wanted to kill him, right? Esau wanted to kill Jacob, so Jacob ran away. He fled the scene of the crime and he went on his way to find his uncle Laban. And so on his way, he's traveling and he falls asleep with his head on this rock. And while he's sleeping, he has this dream, and it's this dream of these angels going up and down from heaven. It's like a ladder, it's a staircase. And so when he wakes up, he's like, oh, wow, the Lord is present here. He promises to give 10% of everything he has to the Lord. And he stands up this rock and he calls that place Bethel. Later on their way back from Laban, him and his family, they will come to this place, Bethel, and remember this story. So um, Jacob shows up and realizes and meets this lady named Rachel, who is taking care of her dad's sheep. Like, wow, this girl's beautiful and wants to marry her on the spot. Says, take me to your dad. Her dad turns out to be Laban, right? And Jacob asks, how many years, or what do you want for your daughter Rachel? So he says, work for me for 7 years, and you will be able to marry Rachel. So he works 7 years. Um, when the 7 years are up, um, Jacob is not very wise and gets drunk, and while he's drunk, he's tricked into marrying the wrong sister. So he wakes up after his wedding and realizes, oh, I married the wrong person. And so he goes to his new father-in-law and uncle very angry. He's like, why did you let me marry the wrong lady? He's like, well, it's a tradition that we don't let the older daughter get married before the younger. So you can have Rachel, um, but you're going to have to work another 7 years. And so he does that. And throughout the story, Jacob loves Rachel and he does not like Leah or love Leah. And so Leah, God opens up her womb and she bears Jacob 10 sons. Okay. And Rachel, eventually, her womb is opened up and she bears him two sons, Benjamin and Joseph. And so this is, or these are the 12 sons of Jacob, which are to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, the names of the Israelite tribes come from most of Israel's sons' names. However, there is no tribe of Joseph. That's because the tribes from Joseph are um, are actually Joseph's sons, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So bears him two sons. Jacob's sin, he's a very selfish person. He's always thinking about himself. You see this throughout it all, and it's never really about his wives. It's never really about what's good. It's always about himself and what he can get out of this world and his sin and satisfying that. And so eventually this catches up to him as he's cheating his father-in-law out of certain things, and so he packs up everything and he runs away. He flees from Laban. Laban catches up to him eventually and sends him away on him with a blessing, but he goes home. He's on his way home, and while he's on his way home, this really strong man named Jacob, he knows he's going to be getting close to his brother Esau, who's still at home, and Jacob's coming back to see if his father is alive, and and just move back into the neighborhood. As he comes back, he's a little worried, and so he breaks up his traveling group, whole bunch of sheep, whole bunch of kids, and he divides them into two groups, and he sends them out in front of him, and he's coming up all by himself in the rear, thinking that his brother Esau is probably going to want to get back at him and kill everything he has. So he's so brave and travels at the back of the pack. However, while he's doing this, he's got his own tent, and God meets him in his tent. And he's said to have wrestled all night with God. And eventually, as the daylight comes, um, they're wrestling, and God touches his hip and gives him a blessing and tells him, "Your name is no longer Jacob, but you will be called Israel." And after that, he walked with a limp. This doesn't, the story of God's faithfulness to Jacob does not mean that Jacob lived a perfect life or deserved God's love. However, it's the opposite. God was perfect in loving and being true to his covenant. Jacob was living a life selfishly, not for God's glory, until later on. And so he is a terrible man, right? One you wouldn't want. However, God is still his redeemer. He's still a father, a patriarch of the redemption plan. And God chooses to use the least of the least, the selfish, the scared, the younger of the two brothers, the one who's willing to sacrifice his family for his own safety. And so they move back. Esau forgives him, and they live in the land. Now, during this time, okay, at the very end of Jacob's life, we'll get into this part in the next slide with Joseph's life, but eventually Jacob moves to Egypt. There's a great famine in the land, and God fulfills his promise to Abraham's grandpa, or Jacob's grandpa Abraham, that your people will be sojourners in a foreign land for 400 years. We'll see that in a second. So Joseph was the oldest son of Rachel, who was born to Jacob. Rachel was the favorite wife, and therefore Jacob was had a favorite son, and his name was Joseph, and he gave him a coat of many colors. Um, he was also known, Joseph, as the dreamer. Okay, he had many sons or dreams of um, his brothers all being represented as stalks of wheat or as moons and stars, and they're all bowing down to him. And they, of course, when you have dreams like that, you share them with your siblings, and they all hate you for it, thinking that you're better than them. Um, so one time he goes out to check on his brothers, wearing his nice coat. His brothers hate him. They they ended up taking his coat, selling him into slavery, and telling his father that, oh, you know what, he died. He was eaten by wolves. And so his father's devastated. Um, while he's sold into slavery, um, he gets bought by Potiphar, someone who is part of the Pharaoh's house, and he becomes in charge of his house, doing very well, and then is falsely accused of trying to commit adultery with Potiphar's wife. Gets thrown into prison. He's there for years. He interprets dreams for the baker and for the cupbearer. One gets hung, one gets promoted, and he's there for years. And then finally, the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, has a dream, and he's troubled by it. He's trying to find someone who can interpret it. And the cupbearer remembers, oh, there's this guy in prison. His name's Joseph. He can interpret your dream. So eventually, he is released. he interprets the dream. The dream was that there's going to be 7 years of good years and then 7 years of famine in Egypt. And so he interprets the dream. Pharaoh places him as second in command and tells him, it's your job to save up food and to save us from starvation and get us through this famine. So he does it. He does it. He does it by building storehouses and placing stores of food everywhere so that people would be able to get what they had saved up and wither or withstand this famine that came. So what's the important themes here is he's born as the favorite. He's sold into slavery, considered dead. Um, but however, as in slavery, he did not leave his convictions. He was still faithful to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and was trustworthy. And eventually, after serving well for Potiphar, was thrown into prison falsely. And God brought him out, interpreted the Pharaoh's dream, and established him to be second in command of the largest kingdom at the time. As this famine spread across the land, Joseph's brothers, who thought that they never hear of Joseph again because they told his dad that he's dead, are hungry and they hear that there's land or there's food in Egypt. So they go to buy food, and Joseph recognizes them. And so he keeps one of them, throws him in prison, tells him, you can't come back for food again unless you bring your younger brother. And there's this whole story of how eventually all the brothers are in the presence of Joseph, and Joseph reveals himself to them. He tells them, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. And so this good is what glorifies God and God's plan of redemption. And eventually, all of the clan of Jacob returns and comes to Egypt where there's food, and Pharaoh gives Jacob's family all the best land in Egypt to farm and to graze. And while they're there, um, they don't leave, and eventually Joseph dies, the Pharaoh died, and now there's a whole bunch of these Israelites living in Egypt as foreigners in a foreign land, sojourners in a foreign land. And this leads to 400 years of slavery and oppression. And this is exactly what God said would happen to Abraham just at the beginning of our short video today. Next up, we have Moses in the process of saving God's people and establishing the kingdom and the reign of Israel on earth.